Hi, welcome to episode 42 of the Breaking Bio podcast. I'm Morgan Jackson, a PhD student at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada, and today we have no script going on whatsoever, so it's going to be a free-form kind of session today. But we've got two guest hosts aside from myself, so we'll start with Heidi.
My name is Heidi Smith. I'm a postdoc at the University of Texas at Austin.
I'm Stephen Hamlin, postdoc at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia.
So I asked for some Twitter questions this afternoon, and some dedicated listeners tuned in and sent in some ideas for what we're going to talk about, so we'll see how many of these we can get through. So first of all, Phil Torres, who was on the show not too long ago, tweeted that we should talk about cool sidekick Kickstarter projects versus those that are more hype than science. So how do you differentiate between what's a good project, science crowdfunding project, versus what is maybe a little bit more sketchy in pseudoscience, or not proven science at least? So, which is a good, interesting topic, because how do you differentiate between them when there's generally no preliminary data or these other things that we usually go by when we're doing grant applications? So what do you guys think? What would be your first thing that you check on when looking at crowdfunding, whether it's something you'd want to put your money towards or promote?
Sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
We're going to be doing this all episode. Are there any examples of a bad one? Has anybody actually put out a fraudulent Kickstarter for science topics? Or
fraudulent, I don't know. I know that, well, the one that Phil specifically mentioned was about a mosquito patch. So this is something that Bug Girl ran into last week, and I wish she was here to actually give the details. But there was a big crowdfunding project. Funding, it's essentially like a patch, an arm patch, like your nicotine patches. You would put it on, and something in it supposedly would keep mosquitoes away. And it got a huge amount of attention in the mainstream media and went huge. I think they were trying to raise $80,000. They ended up raising several $100,000. They went well up and beyond their goal. But there wasn't any data, and they were saying that they were going to be testing it in Africa, supposedly. So this is where they were testing it, and they say it works. We've got all this. We know it works, but we're going to test it over there and use it in situ in the right place, and that's where we're going to test it. And so it was a little sketchy. And so Bug Girl asked the owner of the company, what's going on? How does this work? What is going on with this product? How do we know that it's going to work? And he didn't respond very well at all. He essentially just said, why all the criticism? Why are you guys doubting us? Believe me when I say it works. Give us the money, blah, 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 blah. So it was a little weird in that regard.
So he's from a company. Because I think for some of these things, because there's no, like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, they're not checking into your background, right? They're just giving you a platform to raise money. So especially if it's from some company, I'm not sure if the accountability is there. I've given money to probably like a dozen different projects. They're usually things that I find interesting, usually like salamanders. I've given to some insect projects, but they're usually like small scale things that, it's from a lab that's established, and you can find papers from those people. But yeah, I'm not sure if I would give to a company. But I think for the general public, like outside of the scientific community, if you were going to look at, everybody hates mosquitoes, right? That seems like a good idea. But yeah, that definitely sounds really sketchy. But I'm not sure if that's your responsibility as an individual donor, or if, sort of Kickstarter should be looking into that.
How could they, though? I mean, they can't vet every project.
No, and I mean, they ran into that problem earlier this year where, was it Kickstarter, I think, had a project up that was really horrible. It was something about a dating guide for men, and it was essentially not good at all. It was very, very misogynistic and borderline, rapish.
Yeah. There were some terms in there that were horrible.
Yeah, it was really, really bad, and Kickstarter, let it go until they got caught on it, and then they kind of apologized and all that. But I agree that it's essentially an open platform. It's hard for them to police it. And we should make the distinction that there's two different things going on. There's the Indiegogo Kickstarter things, which are a little bit more open and for a lot of different projects, and then there's also the science projects, which are essentially on their own, like on the Sci-Fund Challenge and such, which are, a little closer to real, or traditional research projects looking for funding.
Well, this is part of a larger phenomenon too, because the Indiegogo and the Kickstarter are like they're actions that people can take, but this is embedded in this larger web of science literacy and how do we determine what's a good scientific project, what deserves funding. Do you remember that excuse me, that Garbage Patch, the Pacific Garbage Patch kid? He had this plan, and it was gonna create this kind of mobile cleaning. It's like a Roomba for the Pacific Ocean, and it was gonna mow around and take out all the garbage, and it got so much attention, and he was getting all kinds of praise for it, and then people were, scientists, marine scientists are saying, well, look, that's actually not going to work and may do significant damage. But it was like a legitimate debate, right? People were saying, well, look, the setup of this, it could be horribly problematic. He was saying, no. How does a member of the general public figure that out, right? And so that wasn't actually a Kickstarter campaign, but it's along the same continuum, because this guy could end up getting a lot of public funded money for a project that we're not even sure is legitimate to start with.
Right. I guess that comes down to the individual. This is a bit of a different issue, but sometimes I think the purpose of giving, or the purpose of raising money in a public way, okay, fine, it's one, to get the money, but it's also to educate and get the public involved in them. There are a lot of programs like the Bug Chicks, right? You donate money and you get, little perks along the way. You get to find out about their trip and follow along. And the point is to make the public feel like they're part of the project. We cannot all be scientists. We can be little amateur scientists and learn about something. And yeah, I think that's a bigger part of it. Just like giving your money to something. I don't know, I guess if you have a lot of money, that's fine. But yeah, it seems weird.
But you raise a good point, though. Is money is in short supply for a large proportion of the population, and a lot of them, judging by how successful a lot of these Kickstarter campaigns and Indiegogo campaigns and Sci-Fund campaigns have been, a lot of people are willing to give up some of that money to, fund some of the science or arts or various other projects that they deem worthwhile. So, I guess the point would be, how close do we have to watch, and should we as scientists be helping to vet some of these things if they start taking off? Like if we see a mosquito patch or an ocean Roomba that doesn't seem to make sense, should we stand up and voice those concerns, or should we just let people give the money to where they think it should go, even if there are definite concerns about it, about the research or the project or whatever?
There was this question a long time ago, maybe on Scientific American, about your responsibility as a scientist. So the whole idea is like you're in some fledgling area of science that's starting to be developed, and someone is doing like a crap job, another researcher in the field is like putting out crappy papers, and it's sort of like bringing the field down. Is it your responsibility to make that person a better scientist, or meet with them and correct their work, or bring up the standards of your science? Right? This was the question posed.
That presumes you're right.
Yeah, but it's like, oh, if everyone else is in agreement. And the problem is that my responsibility as a scientist? For me? No. Would I do it? Like, maybe. But is that my responsibility? I don't think so. My responsibility is to do what I do and do it well, and make these high standards and collaborate with people and do whatever. But it's not my responsibility to fact check everyone else. And that's what I have a hard time with issues like this, is because, yeah, I don't think some shit company should be able to post their crappy Kickstarter project and then probably go get like uninformed consent testing on like kids in Africa or something. This company's totally gonna be contacting me for a libel suit or something. But I wish someone was policing that. But I don't know if that's our responsibility.
Well, we can hope that the internet will live up to its promise and self-police these, right? I mean, sometimes people seem to think of it as kind of peer review on steroids, where you throw something out there and the internet mob decides whether this is good or not, and if it's bad, then it will self-correct and go after it and lynch it. I don't know if that's gonna work, but
yeah. Well, I mean, it has the potential to do it, I guess. But again, we have relatively small voices in the online ecosystem, and it takes a lot of the times a much bigger voice to be heard over some of the enthusiasm for some of these projects, even if they may not, fall out the way that some people are hoping they might. I'm curious whether there's any risk of, almost like a parasitic attachment to some of these things, where they make what sounds like a perfect claim for their product or research or whatever. It sounds in theory like it's going to work fine, garners some sum of money, whether it's large or small, and then you never hear about them again, and it doesn't matter. They come up with something else, and a couple months later, when everybody's kind of forgotten about it, or goes to a new market and tries it again. I don't know. It's a new. Certainly.
There's going to be huge parasitic aspects to this, right? There always is, though.
Oh yeah.
That's not a new phenomenon. We can go back centuries for that. Even I mean, it's probably not going to be as bad as Dr. Morgan's snake oil, but this does have a rich history.
That stuff works really well. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, totally legit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we should and everything.
Yeah, exactly. We should be fair though, and then say that a lot of traditional academic funding doesn't pan out. A lot of people get money for grants and stuff like that you may disagree with, or the results may not live up to the amount perhaps that they were given for it. So it's certainly not something that is unique to these new formats of funding. We should point out.
But I think right, when you ask for the NSF for money, this is a wish, right? Like, you're showing some preliminary data and you're crossing your fingers, and it's not that bad, right? Like, some of the projects will work out. But you also have to write, a budget when you turn that in, and write every little thing that you're going to give that money to. And that grant, you have to keep turning over receipts to that. It's not like someone gets $1 million and the PI disappears, you know what I mean? Like, he's living in Bermuda somewhere,
Big bag with a $sign on it.
Yeah, sometimes these really imaginative things, it's always aim 1 is doable and will definitely work out. Aim 2 is far-reaching, whatever. Aim 3 is wow, if the stars align and I'm able to whatever, that would be the coolest thing. But I think funding agencies have to take a chance on that, because there are so many brilliant people that if you give them a chance. But they've also demonstrated, all this background information. They've demonstrated how many people they've mentored. They've demonstrated how many papers will come out of this. So, and it's something. Some of these big ideas, even if you have negative results, you have results. So then 8 other people in the world aren't going to be trying this crazy expensive project.
Assuming I publish them, of course.
Yeah, that's why you have Figshare, repositories of online data. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe pretty strongly in funding science that may not work, right? So, I believe you have to have blue sky research that, you try it. Well, for one thing, yeah, exactly. The taxonomy guy over there. You try it even though it may not work, because it has to be tried. And the public funding bodies need to be able to respond to that and fund it. The dark side of some of these Kickstarters and places like that science Kickstarter, one was it SciFund? What's it called?
Yeah, the SciFund Challenge, which I think is a part of Rocket Hub, which is a larger body of crowdfunding, but they have a special SciFund Challenge every few months or once a year or something.
I remember looking at those, and they didn't seem to be very successful. I saw only a couple that were actually funded, were they?
I think they're usually going for smaller amounts of money, and I'm pretty sure they are vetted to some degree. I think that they have to pass some sort of a pre-submission peer review of some sort to be allowed into the Sci-Fun Challenge. So there's a little more rigmarole there, but I think they're usually for lesser money as well.
I think
so there's the dark side, right?
But that Sci-Fun is very much set up like it's more like nonprofit, and the people who run that are really trying to like help the scientists and fund, especially ecology projects. That's really difficult to get funding for. The problem is with a lot of these things, it's like this catch-22 situation that if you're a really big name, your Sci-Fun will do amazing because everyone knows you. Everyone knows you. PI people are like, oh, this is going to be amazing. I would love to be a part of that guy's, ant research in Madagascar or whatever. Like, I'll give him money. I'll give him money. But if you're some small person, if you're like a master's student trying to do something that costs $5,000, nobody knows you. Your two aunts and your cousins give you some money, maybe even your mom and a sister. You've got a little, a smattering of friends. But other than that, you'll get the people that work maybe in your taxonomic group or something, but it's hard outside of that to reach people. And then
it has the danger of turning it into a popularity contest.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's... Yeah, but it's also, like, once you've given to Sci-Fund or Rocket Hub or whatever, you always get emails back from them telling you about the other projects. And then it sort of, like, splits your money. Right? Because maybe I gave $20 to this project because it's about salamanders, then I get something else. I'm like, oh, that sounds okay, but I don't like it as much as the other project. I would give $5 or every little bit, but it really, like, we don't have that much disposable income, you know.
And I mean, we do have the projects that are dear to us as well.
Yeah.
But speaking as someone who does mathematical models of viruses, if something like Sci-Fund were the funding model, I would never work again, right? Like it wouldn't happen. Nobody's going to give me money for the kind of stuff I do, because they'll think it's either stupid or they won't understand, or they, I would have a public relations problem in trying to put it out there. Now that you could argue that I just need to work harder, to make it, more, interesting to the public. But maybe Morgan doesn't really want to make that argument, sitting on taxonomy as he is.
Well, it's easy to show people cool bugs and say these things don't have names. That's a fairly relatively easy sell. But yeah, so there is the communication problem, like that you mentioned.
Well, that's a relatively easy thing to communicate. But are people going to respond to it?
Well, yeah. I mean, the one that Heidi just gave as an example, I think his was probably one of the most expensive projects on the Sci-Fun Challenge that year. I think he was looking for $10,000 to do a field expedition to Madagascar. He got it funded without a problem.
Yeah.
And he essentially said that.
It's just me that would be screwed then. Thanks.
It's just you.
No. But the thing is, like, I mean, you can say that, right? Like, we make jokes about insects all the time, but, like, Morgan has an amazing, like, jewel beetles. That's not hard to love. You see that, and, like, you want earrings like that. People want those pictures in their homes. Like, that's charismatic. But you're never whipping out your iPhone showing pictures of viruses, you know what I mean, at a party. No one's inspired by that,
I bet Steven is, actually.
Yeah, people are like,
you think conservation biologists have the charismatic species problem. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? Oh, we'd like to do some work on norovirus. Oh, that's the one where you puke and crap a lot,
Yeah. It's true, but there's always, like, insect people are like, oh, mammals. You've got to be kidding me. Mammals. Like, mammals don't need any more funding, but it's always...
Here's $10 billion.
We're fighting over a small pot of money.
Yeah.
But I think there could be money in, like, modeling, right? I think maybe if you hit your little, like, niche of maybe, like, math people, maybe the conferences for programming, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that was so incredibly dismissive.
You know what you need? What you need is to make a cute cartoon character that can be the mascot of what you study. Like, make a virus cute, like the plushy viruses, like the stuffed animals. Totally fine then, right?
The
marketing
plushie,
genius.
The flu virus plushie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they do. They might even have them.
You raise a good point, though, because, I mean, like you said, a lot of things are a lot easier to get, the public where the biggest money is going to be available from, inspired to dedicate to a project. It's going to be a lot easier if you're, working on harp seals than it is if you're working on norovirus. It's a legit question, and so there may just be things where crowdfunding is not going to be a legitimate funding source for some disciplines.
And ideally, when we're getting money for this, we would hope that it would be on scientific merit, right? That we are, when we submit a funding proposal to the NSF or whatever body, that it's evaluated on the fact of, is this good science, not is this popular science or science that will lead to patents and make us popular in the press.
Unless you're in Canada, in which case that's all that matters.
Yeah, which is why I'm not going back to Canada. So.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But yeah, that's a good point as well, because I think the crowdfunding, it's not so much about what's good science. It's definitely more of a popularity, what sounds like fun science.
So now that we've crapped all over them.
Well, it's not a bad thing. It just needs to be recognized. What the kind of things that are going to be going on crowdsourcing is probably not going to be viral modeling. It's going to be, stuff that people can relate to more easily.
I wonder, this is a bit sort of, a tangent from this, but I always wonder about if you've done crowdsourcing. Let's say I raised $8,000 to study, like aquatic salamanders, and I go to apply for a job. I don't even know if some universities know what crowdfunding is. Which is kind of sad and weird, because you wanna believe that like PIs are like, oh yeah, I got this great project idea from someone that's doing something in another university, like I'll give $50, but I'm not sure, and I'm not sure how they would evaluate that, because I think it's much more difficult to. I mean, I think it shows a lot of like initiative and willingness to put yourself out there to make one of these crowdsourcing videos and pour your heart out for 2 months begging people on Twitter and Facebook and everything else just to get some money to do what you love.
So I think that would be gold on when it comes to the university's point of view. Because realistically, these days, when you're applying for jobs and you're going for postdocs or you're going for jobs, it's, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but it's almost to the point where it's not really the science you do. It's the science you can get funded for. And if you show a pattern of getting funded, external money, if you pry money out of people's hands, universities and departments love you. It almost doesn't matter if the science you're doing is great, just as long as you're getting buckets of money for it.
Yeah,
so if
which
you
they can
then take
demonstrate on top of.
Yeah, and if you can demonstrate the ability to generate outside funding like that, it's not going to hurt. Maybe they don't understand it. Maybe it isn't, the holy grail. But they're not going to look at it and say, "Oh, you got money? Wow, let's put a big X beside her name."
Yeah, I mean, I think it would. I also think it would help. Like if I saw a video, a 3-minute video of Morgan talking about whatever beetles and whatever, I think it adds like another
3 minutes. Sorry.
No, but I think it gives like a personal side.
Yeah, it is a lot different, applying the personal side of science as compared to the sterilized side that we usually do in the third person or second person, writing for grants and such. To be saying, I'm going to be doing this and showing video of you actually doing it, it's a much different model. And I think I would agree sort of with both camps. Yes, universities would like to see you can get money from unusual places, but at the same time, that's pretty far away from the traditional sense, and I don't know. It would depend on from university to university and department to department whether they go for it, I guess.
Yeah, because the university also wants their cut, right?
That's the thing, too.
Reason I'm not going to get that money, though, right? Because if you're going to do a 3-minute video of me doing my research, it's going to be me staring furiously at a computer screen, typing a lot.
That's what Breaking Bio is, and it's totally successful. I don't know what you're worried about.
It's gonna.
Yeah.
The best I can do is make it look like hackers. I mean, come on.
Yeah, you could do. I mean, you'd have to be really creative, but you are, because that's what you do. Modeling these things.
Focus on the model
Yeah,
side. Just hire a whole bunch of really attractive-looking people and throw plush viruses at them. Done.
You think you know what modeling is? You don't know. With Steven.
Throw a little bit of steel in there, and you're good.
Wandering around.
I feel like so many things have changed with people, writing blogs or like us doing this podcast and all these things, that how that will play into when we apply for, jobs and postdocs and other things. I hope
You mean like when they go find our blog and realize this person should not be allowed to do anything ever?
Yeah, I'm really hoping they're like, because there's, on one hand, I'm like, oh, I wonder if they'll see it and be like, this girl can really engage the public. Or if other people are like, wow, she seemed great until we watched this podcast, like, shit show. This girl is a shit show. I really, yeah.
Yeah. And anybody else doing it, so start your own.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm worried.
I think we're at the.
Canada is an example of this, right? Like, look at where Canada is right now. We've got Harper running the board, and his entire focus is on applied research, right?
Yeah.
If it's not going to turn a profit, we're not doing it. And the SciFund models and the Kickstarters, they have that flavor that kind of makes me wary, that we could end up like that, where you have to produce a slick 6-minute video and then show how it's going to, cure something in Africa before people will give you money for it, or else you just can't do the research.
Yeah.
And I'm worried about that model. It
Yeah.
distresses me.
Well, I would really. Sorry, go ahead. No.
I was just going to say, I don't think that crowdfunding is going to completely take over as much as some Republicans in the U.S. might wish it would.
But it is a bit of a doomsday scenario, right?
Oh, it would certainly be bad for 90% of science. If you're not doing medical research or cute fuzzy stuff, good luck.
As a component of science funding, I'm not necessarily against it. Sorry, Heidi, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I always have these like romantic ideas about museums back in the day that would take expeditions that were funded by some big businessman, and there's such like a disparity of wealth in the United States that I want to find, I want a list of some of these wealthy people, and just to give them like pictures of the organisms or ideas. I would love it if like there was, an old lady living somewhere whose husband kicked off and she inherited a bunch of money. She's like, yeah, girl, you find those salamanders. I would love that. It would mean, I would call her once a week, tell her what I'm up to. Yeah. We need more models like that.
Somewhere there's a cat with a really big inheritance that's just waiting to fund a science project, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
like
boy.
people who leave all their money to their pets. If you love animals, you want to help out nature, I'll show you. I'll make that happen for you.
Well, we're almost out of time here, unfortunately, so we should probably wrap up. Just to make sure that we have more viewer participation in the future, I'm going to finish off these last two tweets that we got. So Chris Buttle, who was also on the show a while back, we'll link to his episode at breakingbio.com, challenged us to talk about poetry that was inspired by biology, and just to prove to Chris that it does happen, I've got a poem by a famous author here that's inspired by biology, which happens to be taxonomy. So Vladimir Nabokov, who wrote Lolita and a bunch of other stuff, he was actually more interested in butterfly taxonomy at first than he was in being a writer. Writing pays better than taxonomy. Go figure. But anyways, he wrote this poem, which is To Name a Butterfly. I found it and I named it, being versed in taxonomic Latin, thus became godfather to an insect and its first describer, and I want no other fame. Wide open on its pin, though fast asleep, and safe from creeping relatives and rust, in the secluded stronghold where we keep type specimens it will transcend its dust. Dark pictures, thrones, the stones that pilgrims kiss, poems that take 1,000 years to die, but ape the immortality of this, red label on a little butterfly. So, Chris, poetry inspired by biology, and taxonomy at that. Anyways. Anything to add, anybody? My poetic didn't inspire tears or snaps or anything?
I went to a talk at AMNH once, and it was about biology and poetry together. And Ed Wilson was there. This is going to sound horrible, and like some poet laureate, but I just went there to see Ed Wilson. And they did talk. I mean, I just listened to mostly Ed Wilson, but the other guy talked a lot about how reading this poetry about nature can bring nature, to inner city people, and people have never experienced that. But I don't read poetry I don't really read poetry. I don't know how I'm trying to kid here, but when I read books about nature, like Nico Tinbergen's one of my favorite people ever. But when I read books that he writes, it reminds me of nature, but it reminds me of things that I've already experienced. I'm not sure if I grew up in the concrete jungle, if that would inspire me.
So that was episode 42 of the Breaking Bio podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. It went further than I expected it to go. So you can check us out online at breakingbio.com and on Twitter at breakingbio. We're always happy to have your comments and questions, so feel free to leave comments or tweet at us anytime you want. And till next time, when we have a real guest and some actual structure to the show, remember to watch out for those predatory flatworms. See ya.
Bye.